Story about how my dad helped me save my own life from heroin addiction after he died, and how he is still with me today, middlemaning mediumship experiences through my psychic abilities that I help others with. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of backstory, my father lived in southern Indiana near Cincinnati, where I'm from, and I was living in Austin, Texas. And my dad had been married to a woman for a long time, and addiction like runs deep in her family. And my dad, he's just not an addict. He went to Vietnam when he was 19, so that kind of handed his ass to him. And so he never turned into an addict. He was like a gangster-ish, somebody you didn't mess with, but he was a Marine. Okay. You did not fuck with my dad. And so about, 2 years before he died, there was a period of time where I was talking to my dad every day, every other day. And then out of nowhere, I get this text from my father saying that he never wanted to talk to me again, and he wishing me the best, yada, yada, yada. And I was a heroin and meth addict. I was an IV heroin and meth addict. And I had so much shit going on that I was just like, what, okay, whatever. And I thought it was weird, but it came from my dad's phone. So I was like, okay, so I didn't contact him. So like 3 days go by. And my dad calls and he's like, why haven't you been calling? Why haven't you been calling me? And I was like, you told me not to. And he was like, no, I didn't. Which, if you knew my father and I, we're literally like this. Like, I was the last born. My dad and I were best friends, and I was just like him. Like, we were so much alike. We'd sit down at the dinner table, and the stories that come out of both of our mouths, it's like literally I was a manifestation of him, which is a whole other series of stories. Which is why I keep my mouth shut with my kid most of the time, because I don't want my kid to manifest into what I was crazy when I was young. And so I still had the text message. So I screenshot the text message and I sent it to him. Well, it was my stepmother, and she lied to him. She said she didn't do it. So she got into my dad's phone, told my father, or acted like my father, and I think she was drinking, okay? I think she was drunk. She must have been. Who does that? It's crazy because she has a son that's my age that it's just mind-boggling to me. Like, a step-parent should never be like that. They should never try to put a wedge in between someone and their kid. Like, that is just crazy. So from that point on, I think my dad kind of checked out, because my dad isn't the kind of person who's gonna be in the same house with a liar, okay? That is like, no. We are Italian. We are strong people. We are not going to be in the vicinity in a house with somebody who's lying to us like that. Like, that is just, I knew it too. And, he couldn't really do anything about it. So, but I believe he started to check out. And so there was this wedge from there. It's like my dad couldn't help me. I was in opiate addiction, and he was obsessed with it. Obsessed with it. Like, if you go back and look at his, I know it's hard to watch somebody talk about something when they're crying, so hang on. Oh, no, wait, I can get over it. If you go back and look at his Facebook page, like, even up to the days before he died, he was obsessed with what I was going through, but he was unable to help me, largely because of her, is what I believe. Because he, I mean, literally, he was just like, if you come up here, it's going to be all kinds of problems, da-da-da. And mind you, I had not been home in literally 5 years. This is what happens when you're the scapegoat in a family. You can live thousands of miles away, and everything still gets blamed on you. Even when you're not asking anybody for money, you're not asking anybody for shit. You're literally on the street prostituting yourself to survive and to upkeep a habit that is so, I mean, it is a spiritual lesson that if you're stuck in addiction, you just have to get through that shit and know that there's a reason that you're in it, and you've got to learn the lesson. But, so then nobody tells me that he's sick. 2 years goes by, and I knew I was never going to see my dad again. At one point, this was before I'm sorry, my mom just texted me about something. This is such like there's so much to this story. Before the whole text messages from her started, I knew I was never going to see my dad again, because I had gotten robbed of everything practically I owned except for my car in Colorado. And my stepmom was trying to talk me into coming to Cincinnati to go, listen to this. I had to move into a homeless shelter if I was going to come, and they were going to help me in Cincinnati. I had to move into a homeless shelter that I couldn't take my dog to. And I had my Ollie, my little dog. I'd had him for 14 years. And, you know, I couldn't take him. So what was I going to do with my dog? And then I had to get involved with a church, and it just was not the right fucking decision for me. And my dad knew it wasn't the right fucking decision for me. And so I decided to go back to Austin. I was like, I can't do that. It was going to be a disaster. I knew it was going to be a disaster. And so, but I knew from that point, I was never going to see my dad again. I know if I made this decision, I'm never going to see my dad again. But what I did was I chose me. I didn't choose to make my family happy. I chose me. I chose my lesson. I chose to go on my path and to fucking forge forward through this shit in hopes of someday getting out of it, because I knew I was going back in the crazy, but that's where I wanted to be. And if you want to be somewhere, you're supposed to be there. Period. Point blank. Fucking exclamation point. If you want to be there, you're supposed to be. That's your natural, if you're naturally drawn to it, that's where you're supposed to be. Anyway, so, and then it was a little while before these text messages started happening. It was actually not long after that. These text messages, and then her lying and denying it, and then her messaging me from her Facebook saying the same thing. So then she just gave herself away again. And so my dad and I were separated from each other, you know, not really talking to each other for a good year or so before they told me about the cancer. Anyway, go to part 2. Amount of time. All right, part 2 on how my dad helped me save my life from heroin addiction after he died. Okay. So if you're just getting here, go back to part 1. It'll be the video posted before this, and it's labeled. So I haven't really been speaking to my dad in a long time. And so I guess people were afraid to tell me that my dad had cancer because they were afraid that I was going to go off and overdose on heroin, like they have any control over that shit. But just, to be real clear here, I have overdosed on heroin a bunch of times, like Narcan, like in the hospital a bunch of times, because the shit in Cincinnati is not like the shit in Texas. There's fentanyl. There was fentanyl in the H up in Cincinnati since like the year 2000. I mean, if we're honest. Okay. So, which is another reason I couldn't be in Cincinnati, because I would get drunk and then, end up down on the block getting heroin, and then drinking and heroin is deadly. And so, he finally tells me when he's stage 4, which they wouldn't tell me at first. They wouldn't tell me he was stage 4. And so my dad told me that I needed to come home for Christmas, and this was probably like in October when he's telling me this. And then my stepmom is like, yeah, it's probably a good idea if you come home, and yada, yada, yada. We think he's going to be okay, but, just to come home, whatever. So then when it gets time for them to help me, because my Jeep, I was having all kinds of car problems, like cars getting stolen, like crazy shit was going on. And so my dad wanted to help me with tires for my car so I could just drive my car up there. So then I thought that I fixed the tire issue on my car, and so I didn't need the money for the tires. I needed it for something else to do with my car or something like that. And my stepmom flew off the handle. I'm not paying for your drug habit. Da, 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 da. Like, I wasn't trying to get money for drugs. I knew how to get money for drugs. I was trying to get to my dad. So anyway, so now there's a complete communication breakdown, because this woman doesn't want me there. Okay. And so Christmas goes by, and my dad is in the hospital. He dies in the beginning of January. And, the whole time she's texting me from his phone, just completely inappropriate shit. You don't keep a child from their parent, especially when they're dying. But then also, I couldn't get to Cincinnati. I didn't even have an ID to get on the airplane. Okay. And, but that's neither here nor there. My mom did offer when he died. She was like, because supposedly I wasn't allowed at the funeral because she was manipulating everything. And of course, turning my whole family, trying to turn my whole family against me to deflect the fact that she's the one who's fucked up. Okay. It's quite simple. So, but I chose not to go to my dad's funeral because my mom was like, you want to go to the funeral? I'll get your ass there. She wasn't, my mom wasn't fucking around, and there was no way. I mean, I was going to be dope sick, yada, yada, yada. I'm a medium. I already knew that I was a medium. I don't really fuck with funerals, to be honest with you, because they're lightweight demonic, and, I know that nobody ever really dies anyway. So I was like, I didn't need that. I didn't need to go to my dad's funeral. So he's gone, right? So then, it was hard, of course, and I'm not going to go into anything like that. But anyway, I knew that my dad was with me. So I had this friend is now dead, okay? His name was John, and I was at John's house, and John was one of those people that when he got high, it was like, it was too much. Well, he's dead. So his tolerance was like really low. So when he would get high, he was completely checked out. Like, he was not in his body. He was not, he like could barely walk. Okay. So when things like this happen, it is possible for spirits to jump into your body. So I'm at John's house, and it's just me and John. And, you know, John was completely out of it. He was freaking me out is really what he was doing. He was being completely inappropriate. But then, so he's like nodded out, and I start to hear my father. Now, if you knew my father would always joke about, and my psychic stuff comes from my dad's. If it comes through a bloodline, it comes from my dad's side of the family. My dad was very, very psychic. He just didn't go into it, probably because he was scared, because he had a lot of fucking things following him around. Oh my God. Story for another day. Living in that man's house. You'd be lucky if you make it out of that house alive. You gotta be strong-minded for the amount of shit that was following my dad around, which I didn't figure out until later. But I start to, you know, like my dad made certain noises. He made certain noises. And like a certain octave, a certain tone, which is completely different than my friend John, okay? So I start to hear my father trying to, like, jumping in to John's body to try and, like, get across that he was there. This is right after he died. I'm talking like within a week or two. And like these noises that I've been hearing my father make for my whole life were coming through John while he's like nodded out, trying to like come out of a nod, but, you know, unsuccessful. So then there was that. Okay. So my dad, to make a long story short, because this could go on forever, within a year, okay, I've been struggling with heroin addiction for over 20 years. Over 20 years. I don't know the exact number, and I'm not going to say here. It was like probably like 24 years or some shit like that. Like, I'm 43 now, but I finally got sober when I was 37. Got off heroin. I don't believe in, I mean, I haven't done heroin since then, but it's like, I don't believe in full abstinence. That is fucking stupid. Yeah, you shouldn't be shooting heroin, but cutting yourself off from everything is a recipe for disaster. It's a recipe for death, and it is a recipe for trapped energy that is going to come out in fucked up ways like narcissism, manipulation, you know, lying, all kinds of shit. It's just better to be honest with yourself and give your body what it wants and what it needs when it needs it. It's really my life philosophy. So I was sober within a year of my dad dying. Or is it was less than a year. It was less than a year. It was October 12th is when I finally went into the psych ward, 4.5 months pregnant, and never looked back. This is part 2. I'll probably do a part 3. Okay, part 3 about how my father helped me help myself overcome heroin addiction after he died. Okay, so I realized I didn't go into this, and to be honest with you, I don't know if it was less than a year after he died, or if it was a year, and then if it was a year and a half. It's kind of a blur back then. But I had, when I went into like a deep heroin addiction, this is before my father died, years before my father died. yes, I'd been doing heroin for over 20 years, but there was a point in like 2016 or 2015 where, I was going for it. Like, I was going for the heroin addiction because yes, I'd been using heroin for a long time, but I wasn't to the status to where it was like I was a junkie. Okay. And I was like, I made a conscious decision to do it, and I didn't realize that it was going to be as hard to get off of that it was, because once I realized my purpose, and which I had to be in active addiction in order to be on such the outskirts of society and so numb to everything to find my purpose and to figure out that I was a medium, that I was psychic, that I wasn't fucking crazy, that everything I had been going through psychologically since I was young was because I was psychic. It wasn't because I was fucking crazy. And I didn't figure that out until I was reading cards for a stranger, and his wife, who had passed, was in my ear spelling her name out, and her name came out of my mouth, and then everything was just like, oh my fucking God, everything made sense. This was before my dad died. This was when I realized what my purpose was, and that the switch flipped, and I then knew I had to get off drugs. From that point, I was like, oh. And then I had that overtook the want to be on drugs, because I wanted to be on drugs for a really long time. And that's why I was doing it, because I wanted to be doing it. It wasn't for some other fucking deep underlining issue. Like, I'd been in therapy for so fucking long throughout my life since I was little. Like, there was no like deep, it was like, I wanted to be on drugs. But then once I figured out why I was here and what my purpose was, and that I was psychic and I had all these gifts and everything made sense, and it was like, oh, I gotta get off heroin. Like, I gotta get off this shit. Like, I finally was like, okay. But from that point, it took 2 years from that point for me to get off heroin. And it wasn't that I wasn't trying. It was like I was trying, and it just was not happening. So after my father died, it was like and I knew that he was there with me. Things just started to line up. I made the decision to have my son, and which that's a story for another day, my son. And then the universe, and of course my dad included, the universe literally helped me get to the point where all I wanted to do was get off drugs. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to have my son, and I wanted to be off drugs. And the universe assisted me in doing that in the most perfect way possible. And I know in my heart that I could not have done it without my dad. And I know that him leaving his body, him making the decision to exit and to move on, was something that, this is what I'm told and this is what I feel, was a decision of his that he made before even coming into this lifetime. And before I was born, it was a contract. Like, if I wasn't able to navigate and get myself out of it, that he was going to exit, and he was going to make sure that shit happened from the other side. And that's exactly what he did. And he's with me. My son talks about seeing him all the time. My son is 5 now, but and he has my dad's last name. And he'll like do some weird dance or whatever, and I'll be like, where did you learn that? And he'll be like, my grandpa, you know? So, and I've had mediumship experiences, you know, it's stories for another day. It's just, I've lost a lot of people to death since I've been alive this time. And after a certain point, I realized, because mostly it's friends. I mean, yes, I've lost relatives, but I've lost a lot of friends. And, you know, we have different relationships with our friends than we do our family. And I mean, nothing is like losing a parent. That's like a whole other layer of losing a part of your identity, and at the same time reclaiming your true identity. Once they're gone, there's gifts in all of it, and you don't realize a lot of the things that I'm speaking for myself. I didn't realize a lot of the things I was holding myself back in life because of my dad, because of not wanting to, you know, leave him or, you know, upset him, even though, I mean, good God, I've done everything in the world to drive that man crazy. I mean, my God. But still, there was still things with him passing, and I realized that, you know, like moving out of the country, that's something I could never move out of the country if my dad was alive. That is just something that, you know, just one of those things. So my dad won't get on airplanes. Anyway, so losing so many people, I finally just realized after like my third best friend died, well, second, I don't know if it was the second or the third, there's so many, that my psychic abilities were strengthening through every friend that passed away. It started with my grandfather. My grandfather was the first one to go. Well, my friend Adam died, and then Grandpa died, and then my best friend died after Grandpa, like right around the same time. My best friend and Grandpa died, but I know it was my grandpa first. My grandfather, and I've seen a pattern with this too with other people, grandfathers are a huge part of people's psychic development from the other side. It's not just me. I've talked to tons of people, of course not, but many people who their grandfathers play a huge role in their psychic development from the other side. My best friend Clint played a huge role in my psychic development because I was so broken from him being gone. I knew that I could find him in the astral realm. So, and I was going out of my body naturally, and I was so scared to do it on command and you know, consciously. But when he died, it took away all that fear. When I laid down, I was laying down to go out of my body and to find Clint, and nothing was going to stop me. And I mean, and it just keeps growing from there. I mean, people die in our lives for us to evolve consciously more. And they're all on the other side helping me. They're all still around me. They're like my little angel army. It's wild. Anyway, if anybody wants me to go more into this, just let me know. If you have any questions, just stick that shit in the comments. All right, bye.